Gas is at $4.16 a gallon. The airports are in chaos. The government has been shut down for 57 days. And everyone is blaming Iran. But Iran didn't break America. Iran just showed you it was already broken. You already know gas is expensive right now. You do not need me to read you the numbers. You felt it the last time you filled up. You felt it when your grocery bill jumped for no obvious reason. You felt it when the delivery fee on your food order went up by $2 and nobody explained why. What you might not realize is how fast it happened. At the start of January, the national average was $2.81 a gallon. Right now, it is $4.16 a gallon. That is not a slow creep. That is a 48% spike in 3 months. And depending on where you live, it is much worse. In parts of Los Angeles, regular gasoline is over $7 a gallon. But here is the thing most people get wrong. They think it is just a gas problem. It is not. When fuel gets this expensive this fast, it is not a price going up. It is a tax on your entire life, because everything that reaches you moves on trucks, trains, or cargo ships powered by that fuel. Your groceries, your building materials, your Amazon packages, your rent, your paycheck, you are paying for it everywhere. You just do not see a line item on the receipt. Here is what actually happens. We built the American economy on one bet, that energy would always be cheap and available. No backups, no reserves sitting around. The whole supply chain was designed to run lean, fast, and cheap. So when gas spikes 48% in 3 months, the system does not absorb the shock. It transmits it. Transport costs go up. Businesses raise prices to cover it. Prices go up everywhere. Inflation jumps. Suddenly, the Federal Reserve is forced to act, and that triggers a cascade of other problems. If you are thinking this feels familiar, you are right. This exact thing has happened before, twice. And both times we watched the same domino fall in the exact same order. What I am about to show you is what actually happened the last 2 times and to explain why it keeps happening. October 1973. OPEC slaps an oil embargo on the United States in retaliation for America backing Israel in the Yom Kippur War. And almost overnight, the country turns into something unrecognizable. Gas stations run dry. Lines stretch for miles. People show up before dawn, engines idling for hours, burning the gas they came to buy. Fistfights break out at the pumps. Gas station owners start carrying guns. States roll out odd-even rationing if your license plate ends in an odd number. You can only buy gas on odd-numbered days. Oregon bans Christmas lights entirely. Times Square goes dark. But why did a war in the Middle East turn into lines at gas stations in Ohio? Because America had spent 2 decades building its entire transportation and manufacturing system on the bet that OPEC would stay weak. We imported 35% of our oil, and we built 0 strategic reserves. If the flow stopped, we had maybe 30 days before the system started failing. OPEC did not invent this vulnerability. We did. They just turned off the tap and watched. Gas quadruples, inflation triples, the economy enters stagflation, prices going up while everything else is going down. The worst of both worlds for years. Here is where it gets real. When inflation gets out of control, the Federal Reserve has only one option. They raise interest rates. They make borrowing so expensive that people stop spending. Demand falls, prices stop rising. It works, but it breaks something else. When you make borrowing expensive, businesses stop expanding. People stop buying homes, companies stop hiring, unemployment climbs, the middle class gets crushed. The Fed had to choose inflation or jobs. They chose to kill inflation. They did, but they also killed the economy. Unemployment hit 9%. The middle class spent the next 5 years digging out of the hole. Everyone blamed OPEC. Everyone forgot that OPEC only had leverage because we had built a system that gave them leverage. 6 years later, it happened again. 1979. The Iranian Revolution takes out 5 million barrels a day of oil production. The same panic, the same lines, the same rationing. President Carter goes on national television and calls it the moral equivalent of war. But this time, the consequences were worse. We had not learned. American oil consumption was higher. Strategic reserves were still pathetic. And because we had already been burned once, the panic was immediate and severe. Inflation hits nearly 15%. The Fed is forced to raise interest rates to almost 20%, the highest rates in American history. A recession so brutal it reshapes the American middle class for a generation. Savings evaporate, home equity vanishes, entire industries collapse. Everyone blamed Iran, the revolution. But Iran did not choose to have a revolution to hurt America. Iran chose a revolution for Iran. We just happened to have built a machine so dependent on them that their internal crisis became our crisis. Do you see what is actually happening? It is the same pattern. An external shock hits. We have no buffer to absorb it, so the shock transmits straight into the economy. Prices go up, the Fed has to raise rates, the economy breaks. Everyone blames the external shock instead of asking why we built a system with no defenses. 1973, embargo. 1979, revolution. 2026, Strait of Hormuz closure. Different trigger, same collapse, but there is something different this time. Because there is a second crisis happening at the same time. And it is not random. It was triggered by the first one. You probably heard that the government shut down, but I don't think most people understand what that actually means, or why it happened now, at this moment. The Department of Homeland Security has been unfunded for 57 days. That makes this the longest government shutdown in American history, and it's the second one in 6 months. Government shutdowns happen when Congress can't agree on a budget. But here's what most people don't realize. Congress doesn't shut down by accident. They do it on purpose. They use it as a weapon. In January, federal immigration agents killed 2 U.S. citizens during an enforcement operation in Minneapolis. Democrats said they would not fund Homeland Security unless immigration enforcement reforms were attached, including warrant requirements, a ban on agents wearing masks, and a prohibition on racial profiling. Republicans refused, so Congress held Homeland Security hostage, not because Homeland Security was the problem, but because one party wanted to use it as a lever to force the other party to move on something else entirely. This is the trap. Congress shuts down agencies because there is no consequence for them personally. They keep their salaries, they keep their benefits, the pain falls on someone else. In this case, the TSA employees. But why does a shutdown in Congress hit harder right now? Because the shutdown happened while energy markets were already shaky, while oil was spiking, while the Federal Reserve was already in a corner. Here is what is happening. An oil spike means inflation pressure. Inflation pressure means the Federal Reserve cannot cut rates. The economy gets fragile, and then Congress shuts down the government. The TSA cannot operate properly. Airports start breaking. Now you have 2 crises hitting at the same time, making each other worse. And what happened at the airports reveals the full extent of how fragile the system has become. Think about this for a second. You go to work. You do your job. Your job happens to be standing between the American public and whatever might try to get onto a commercial airplane. And at the end of the pay period, you get nothing. No check, no deposit, no explanation other than Congress is still fighting. That is what happened to over 60,000 TSA employees. For 44 days, they collectively missed more than $1 billion in wages. $1 billion for the people running airport security in the United States of America. Some turned to food banks, some sold plasma, some picked up overnight shifts stocking shelves after a full day screening passengers. One officer in Colorado talked about waking up at 3 a.m., refreshing her bank app over and over, hoping a check had appeared. Nothing. Here is what breaks the system. You cannot just tell 60,000 people do not come to work. They have to come to work. Planes are flying. The airports need to run. So you have thousands of people showing up every day with no paycheck, no ability to pay rent, no way to feed their families. At some point they break, they stop showing up, they quit, and then the system that is supposed to function stops functioning. At Houston Hobby, more than half of the TSA workforce did not show up on a single day in March. In Atlanta, the busiest airport on Earth, more than a third were gone. Security lines hit 4 hours, then 5. Houston's George Bush Intercontinental posted a warning telling passengers to show up 5 hours early. Over 500 officers quit. That is on top of 1,100 who already left during the shutdown last fall. 1,600 trained screeners gone in 6 months, and each one takes 4 to 6 months to train. Eventually, President Trump signed an order redirecting money from last year's reconciliation bill to pay TSA workers. Most got a partial check on March 30th. Partial. Many were short by over $1,000. The Tampa supervisor, who had been waiting 6 weeks, said her back pay was gone in days. It barely covered half the bills that had stacked up. So the people keeping your flights safe spent a month and a half unable to pay their own rent. And here is the thing most people do not talk about. The majority of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. A partial payment is better than nothing. But when you are not getting paid for your service, when that back pay gets swallowed by bills that piled up, a partial check does not fix the devastation. It just prolongs it. While these employees were sitting at home wondering how they would pay rent, how they would feed their families, the government made a choice that showed exactly how broken the system had become. Hundreds of armed agents, 14 major airports, no masks, and a mandate that revealed exactly how weaponized the system had become. On March 23rd, Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents walked into those airports. Tactical gear, sidearms. Trump specifically requested they remove their masks. The official story was that they were there to relieve TSA workers of simple tasks. Watch exit doors, manage crowds, check identification, free up the remaining screeners to focus on the X-ray machines. Now, stop and think about what just happened. This entire shutdown exists because of a fight over immigration enforcement. ICE is the agency at the center of that fight, and ICE is the only part of Homeland Security that is fully funded. Congress gave it $75 billion last summer through a separate bill. So Congress would not fund TSA, would not fund FEMA, would not fund airport security. They held all of it hostage. But ICE got fully funded, because Congress was using ICE as a leverage point to negotiate. Congress had created a structure where the only agency with funding and authority to respond when TSA broke was the agency Congress had held hostage to pressure. It was not a coincidence. It was a consequence. Then the TSA workers got so exhausted that the system started breaking, and the solution was to bring in ICE. The agency that was fully funded while TSA was unfunded is now standing in airports alongside the workers who went unpaid because of a political fight about that very agency. You cannot write this stuff, but it gets deeper. The White House said ICE was there for crowd control, but border czar Tom Homan also said agents would be identifying potential immigrants who are not in this country legally. Reuters obtained internal ICE data showing that the TSA passenger screening system, built after 9/11 as a counter-terrorism tool, flagged over 31,000 travelers for possible immigration enforcement. More than 800 were arrested. Videos surfaced of agents arresting a crying woman at San Francisco International in front of her daughter. Lawyers described a couple, Irish, who had lived in America for over 20 years, detained during a domestic flight from Florida to New York in front of their kids. Here is what I need you to see. Congress created a shutdown to gain leverage on immigration enforcement. That shutdown broke airport security. The broken airports created an opening for ICE to move in. And now the system that was supposed to protect travelers is being used to police them. Every step created the next step. Congress shut down TSA to gain leverage on ICE. TSA became desperate. ICE got invited in. ICE expanded its authority. The machine broke itself on purpose to gain a negotiating advantage. But while all of this is happening, the chaos at the airports, the unpaid workers, the ICE operations, it is also a distraction. Because there is something even bigger moving in the background, something that does not make headlines the same way. The Federal Reserve is in a trap, and to understand why, you need to know how we got here. For 15 years, from 2008 to 2023, interest rates were near zero. Why? Because the 2008 financial crisis broke the economy so badly that the Fed had to keep rates at emergency levels just to stop everything from collapsing. They were pumping money into the system constantly, keeping it cheap to borrow, keeping it cheap to spend. For 15 years, the government borrowed money at near zero interest rates, trillions of dollars. Then COVID happened. The government printed more money and handed it out as stimulus checks. The Fed kept rates near zero. People got paid to stay home. Businesses got loans that were basically free. This worked. People could not work. They needed the money. They needed the cheap borrowing. But then people went back to work. They started spending again. And because there was so much money in the system and not enough things to buy, inflation exploded. Suddenly your dollar was worth less. Your paycheck went less far. Everything cost more. So the Fed did what they always do when inflation spikes. They raised interest rates. Raised them fast, from near zero to 5.5% in a year and a half. They were trying to make borrowing expensive so people would stop spending, demand would fall, and prices would stabilize. Here is where it gets stuck. The government is still borrowing, a lot, and now they are borrowing at 5.5% instead of near zero. That means the interest payments on government debt are exploding. Federal interest payments were $600 billion a year. Now they are heading toward $1 trillion a year. That is money that is not going to roads, schools, or anything else. It is just going to pay interest on debt. Meanwhile, the rest of the economy is screaming. Home buyers cannot afford mortgages. Car loans are getting longer because people cannot afford the monthly payments. Businesses cannot refinance at the old rates. So the Fed is trapped in a math problem with no good answer. If they cut rates to help the economy, inflation comes roaring back. The dollar loses value. Savers get destroyed. But if they keep rates high, the economy breaks. Companies stop hiring. People lose jobs. You get a recession. They cannot pick the right move because both moves are bad. That is what it means to be trapped. And then the oil shock hit. Gas is at $4.11. Oil is above $100 a barrel. That is inflation pressure hitting the economy right when the Federal Reserve has no way to respond. The Federal Reserve's only move in a recession is to cut rates and pump money into the system. But if they do that with inflation this high, they are just making the problem worse. So they sit, stuck, watching the economy soften, watching unemployment start to tick up, watching consumer confidence collapse. Gas at $4.11 was the price in the summer of 2008. Right before Lehman Brothers collapsed. Right before the worst financial crisis in 80 years. The public was being told the economy was fundamentally sound. The recession had actually started 7 months earlier. Nobody knew it yet. We are seeing the same combination now. An oil shock, a trapped Federal Reserve, government unable to respond, falling consumer confidence. The mechanics are different this time. There is no housing bubble, but the pattern is identical, and that is how you know something is coming. So here is what I want to leave you with. Everyone is distracted. They are looking in different directions and blaming different things. For gas prices, they are blaming Iran. For airports falling apart, they are blaming the government. For recession fears, they are blaming politics, and they all play a factor. Gas prices did spike. The government did shut down. Politics did create a mess. But that is not the root of the problem. The root is that our system is fragile. So fragile that any one of these events can trigger a cascade. Gas prices did not cause a recession. The government shutdown did not cause a recession. Politics did not cause a recession. They are all just revealing what was already true. In 1973, an embargo revealed that we had no energy reserves. In 1979, a revolution revealed that we had learned nothing. In 2008, a housing collapse revealed that we had optimized everything for cost instead of resilience. And now, in 2026, the Strait of Hormuz is revealing the same thing all over again. We do not have a system. We have a house of cards. And every time an external shock comes, and they always do, the cards fall in the exact same pattern. The gas prices are not the cause of what is coming. They are the indicator, and the indicator is flashing.